Likely the most known college football player of all time just committed to Texas, Archie Manning. It's no secret as to why he's well known. He's the #1 recruit in the 2023 class, and yeah, he's a Manning. His uncles are Peyton and Eli. But now, it's Archie's turn to pave his own way to the NFL, and it'll start at Texas. Everybody knows Archie's uncles, Peyton and Eli, and most know his grandfather, Archie. Well, the other sibling is usually forgotten about, the oldest, Cooper. Cooper was once a highly touted high school wide receiver who committed to Ole Miss, but during practices starting in the summer, he felt some numbness in his fingers and toes, and he ended up being diagnosed with spinal stenosis, a narrowing of the spine and the pinching of nerves. It ended his playing career. But Peyton did carry on his legacy, deciding to don his jersey number 18. Everyone knows Peyton and Eli. Peyton played 18 years in the NFL, won 2 Super Bowls, one with the Colts and one with the Broncos, was a 5-time MVP, and is one of the greatest quarterbacks in NFL history. Plus, he's already in the Hall of Fame. Eli won 2 Super Bowls on his own, spent his whole career with the Giants, and has his number 10 retired. And I guess we'll see him in the Hall of Fame at some point. Maybe. It's not like Peyton and Eli came out of the woodworks to be some talented quarterbacks, though. Nah, I'd have to imagine that came from their dad, Archie. Peyton and Eli were first overall picks. Maybe Arch will be one day too, but Archie was the second overall pick back in 1971. He played for the Saints for about a decade, and he had brief stints with the Oilers, yes, they were a team back then, and the Vikings. Safe to say, the Manning family has had football success, but Arch is the next wave of Mannings set up to dominate the gridiron. From the moment Arch stepped foot at Isidore Newman, all eyes were on him. Isidore Newman isn't exactly new to the spotlight after all 3 Manning brothers went there, plus Odell Beckham Jr. Arch was the varsity starting quarterback as a freshman, and it was clear from the second he stepped on the field, he didn't look like a freshman. Archie even said that he was ahead of Peyton and Eli at the same age. Arch dominated, as you'd expect. He was the Max Preps National Freshman of the Year after he passed for 2,407 yards and 34 touchdowns. The next season, Arch kept rolling. He threw for 1,922 yards and 21 touchdowns. Plus, the world finally got to see Arch do his thing. Isidore Newman played on national television, and on display, Arch threw for 2 touchdowns and rushed for another 2. His junior year, this past season, Arch had 1,947 yards to go with 26 touchdowns. His recruitment has been very different, at least compared to other top recruits these days. Arch has had to grow up in the spotlight at every level. Even videos of him throwing before high school would go viral, so he wanted to avoid a media mess. Arch hasn't done media interviews, and he even declined premature college scholarship offers. He clearly doesn't like social media. It's actually kind of hilarious. His Instagram is private, and his Twitter, where he announced his commitment, it was his first tweet. He doesn't follow anyone, and his bio is the funniest part. High school student. That's it. Arch isn't your everyday recruit, and it's going to be interesting seeing what he's like once he's in the spotlight, because obviously he won't be able to avoid it forever. His high school coach, Nelson Stewart, has claimed that he does have a lot of humility, and he doesn't really like the attention. Even Archie has talked about how Arch is just a sweet kid, and one of the coolest stories Archie has told was that some of the freshmen's dads on the high school team have told him that Arch was just so nice to their sons. Arch, this big-time famous high schooler, clearly on the fast route to the NFL and millions of dollars, is still humble and treats others the right way. That's the Manning way. And that's the kind of character that any school in the country wants on their team, and a lot of them tried. Obviously, every school with any shot at Arch would give it a shot, but it seems like only a few were actually considered outside of Texas. Based on his decision, I'd imagine that Arch really wanted to pave his own way and not live in the shadow of his family, which is still hard to do. Tennessee never had too much stir to it, Peyton's alma mater, but neither did Ole Miss, where Cooper, Eli, and Archie all went. One big surprise school you wouldn't expect to be on Arch's list was actually Virginia. It sounds kind of crazy, but there's a lot of logical reasons for it. A lot of people don't know this, and honestly, the only reason I really do is because I grew up a UVA fan before I dipped off and decided to go to Virginia Tech, but his roots are still there with rooting for UVA, and I'd imagine that Arch grew up rooting for UVA at least a little bit. His mom went there, his aunt went there, Peyton's wife, and his older sister is currently a student there, so it makes sense. But I doubt it was ever seriously considered. At the end of the day, it's hard to know if Arch really considered UVA, Ole Miss, or Tennessee, but the family connections are at least obvious. For the most part, it's been a 3-school race for Arch for a while: Texas, Alabama, and Georgia. He visited all 3, and surprisingly, he picked a school with, obviously, significantly less success than the others recently. For a bit, rumors claimed that Arch was down to 2 schools, and Georgia was out of the running, down to just Bama and Texas. The pitch at Bama is easy: come play for Nick Saban and be a part of one of the greatest college dynasties of all time. Clearly, that wasn't enough for Arch, and instead, he decided to commit to Texas to play for Steve Sarkisian. Sarkisian took the Texas job in 2021 after he was Alabama's offensive coordinator for 2 seasons, and before that, he was the Falcons' offensive coordinator and the head coach at USC and Washington. Texas was still so bad in his first year as head coach: 5-7, 2-6 in the Big 12, but now he's brought in 2 of the best quarterback prospects, really ever. The other, Quinn Ewers. You've probably heard the name Quinn Ewers, or at least seen his crazy-ass hairstyle, but he's supposed to be an absolute beast. And Arch coming to Texas really makes things interesting for him. Ewers was incredible in high school. Top recruit in the 2022 class, and then later, the top recruit in the 2021 class after he reclassed. That's how good he was. Originally, Ewers committed to Texas, but rules wouldn't allow him to make money with NIL, so he decided to enroll at Ohio State. He had to sit behind CJ Stroud, and he decided he would transfer now that he could make NIL money at Texas. So he went back to Texas, and he's going to be the starting quarterback in 2022, unless something wild happens. But then what? Arch shows up to campus in 2023, and all of a sudden, Texas has 2 of the best high school recruits this decade, and one of them, Ewers, could play 1 more year and jump to the NFL. So does Arch sit for a year? It's going to create a mess. And with how good Ewers is, I think he could absolutely beat out Arch, considering he'd be a junior and the retaining starter, and Arch would have just showed up in Austin. But look, I'm not a huge Texas guy. I don't know everything about the Longhorns, but let's hear from somebody who does.
As your resident Texas Longhorns fan, the guys asked me to come on, so of course, I'm happy to talk about Arch Manning, and he is now one of 3 of the only perfect quarterback recruits of all time, and all 3 are going to Texas. Of course, you had Vince Young win a national championship at Texas. Quinn Ewers was committed to Texas, ended up going to Ohio State for the NIL money for a year, and has transferred back to Texas, where he will hopefully be everything we want and more: live arm, decent athlete as well, and the mullet earns him points for sure. And of course, now Arch Manning coming in, another perfect quarterback recruit with obviously a lot to live up to. And that's what these guys are at the end of the day. They're high school guys. We really haven't seen them. Even Quinn Ewers didn't play at all at Ohio State, obviously with CJ Stroud, but these are exceptional talents. And everyone's talking about, oh man,
Texas is going to ruin Arch Manning and Quinn Ewers.
But at the very least, Steve Sarkisian is a good offensive mind. And Texas will have weapons. Playing in the Big 12, they're going to put up points. They did even last year, despite losing a lot of games, even at Kansas at home. But the story of last year was just completely going away from Sark's own motto of all gas, no brakes. Far too much braking going on in the second half. Go back and look at the Texas schedule. Second half collapse, second half collapse, second half collapse. It was the entire season. Against Oklahoma, Texas was destroying them. Completely collapsed in the second half. Against Oklahoma State was up, completely collapsed in the second half, and especially the fourth quarter. And you can do that with many different games. So Texas has the talent. They have big time transfers. Isaiah Nair out of Wyoming was excellent last year. Ajay Hall coming from Alabama, high potential, didn't show it yet at Alabama. We'll have to see. Jaleel Billingsley, not great last year for Alabama at the tight end, but 2 years ago when Sark was calling plays, pretty good. He got first round buzz. So the potential is there. The talent is there. It's going to end up hinging on the Texas offensive line and the defense, whether or not they're going to put up points. We all know what Bijan Robinson can do out of the backfield. This is a team and a situation that's going to be perfect for Arch Manning, perfect for Quinn Ewers, and I hope as a Texas Longhorns fan that it all comes to fruition.
It sounds like whether it's Ewers or Arch behind center in Texas, they're in a good spot moving forward. Plus, Arch is going to have some kind of familiarity at Texas with tight end Will Randall. Randall, a 3-star, played at Isidore Norman with Arch, and when he committed to Texas, well, it kind of signaled that Arch may be heading there too. Plus, Texas is heading to the SEC soon, and by then, Ewers could be playing in the pros if everything goes well for him, meaning that Arch will be leading the charge for the Longhorns, having to go up against the best talent in college football, playing in the SEC just like his 2 uncles and grandfather, continuing the Manning legacy on his way to the pros.